And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us. And one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it. And that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon Wright. Tonight's episode, we're going to be joined by my guest, Ken. Ken reached out to me because he believes he's being targeted by the government. There's been a lot of strange things going on. He wanted to come on here and talk a little bit about that. But before we bring Ken on, if you've ever had an experience and you would like to be on an episode of Tinfoil Tales, you can send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com, or you can go to the contact section at tinfoiltales.com. Either way works for me. Just make sure to reach out and we will get something scheduled for a future episode. If you'd like to help the podcast out, please share it around. Word of mouth helps the podcast grow. For every time you share, it's a potential new guest coming to the show, discovering it for the first time. You can also help by leaving a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to Tinfoil Tales at. So just leave a 5-star rating. Helps with the algorithms. You can also become a member of the Patreon. You can find more information about that in the show notes, but on Patreon you get early access to all the episodes and they're all ad-free. Up to 2 months worth of content available before anywhere else. So it's worth checking out for only $1.99 a month. Make sure to follow me around on all the social medias. I am doing a weekly show on Sunday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It is a live call-in show called Tinfoil Talks, available exclusively over on YouTube. So if you're not a member of the YouTube page, make sure to go there, subscribe, hit the notification bell. But we're going to go ahead now and bring Ken on and dive into the conversation. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'd like to take this time to welcome my guest tonight, Ken. Thanks for coming on here and talking to me.
Thanks for having me.
Would you like to let the audience know a little bit about yourself before we dive into it?
Yeah, I have this condition called chemical sensitivity, and I started having problems back in 2009, and I was living in Elizabeth City at the time, North Carolina, and I noticed chemical fumes outside that were bothering me, but they didn't bother anybody else, and I could smell them, and they were probably about 5 or 6 different chemicals that they were using at the time that I could smell outside, and they would affect me. They'd make me feel bad and a little bit ill, but nobody else noticed them. And so after a few days, I noticed the chemicals were strongest near the Coast Guard base that they had in town and near the river. And I called the EPA in North Carolina, and they said they'd inspect the area. And then a few days after the inspection, I noticed it seemed like I started getting sprayed myself. I'd be out in the car, we're going around town, and I'd come home, park the car in the driveway, and I'd get out, and there would just be chemicals swirling all around the yard and around my legs, and just freshly sprayed. And I was like, and at first I thought, well, it's probably just a coincidence, because I noticed they would go around spraying anyway. And I guess this was the military doing some kind of chemical spraying. But I'd noticed it all around town. But like I said, it was strongest near the base and the river. And so I said, well, they just came by on doing their daily spraying, and I just happened to come by at the same time. But then it happened the next day, and I was still like, I didn't want to believe that they were after me. I said, well, it's just a coincidence. But then it happened the third day, and I said, they're after me. And it just blew my mind, because I didn't think things like that happened in America. Um, but it was like my whole world just came crashing down around me. And my whole belief system just was shattered in an instant. And then I thought to myself, of course they're coming after me. Why wouldn't they? Um, they've got the power, they've got the means. So, uh, so then once I realized that they were, after that, it just got worse. It just, every day it seemed to pick up, and they were spraying the house, and I could never see anybody doing it, but they seemed to be close by. And because the wind would just whip. There would be days when the wind was just so random, just whipping back and forth. And they could spray the part of the house that I was in, no problem. They could just target that side of the house. And and once again, and what was strange about these chemicals was they would disappear in like 3 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes if they stopped spraying. Uh, so they were really, really volatile. And so what they had to do, it seemed like I was always covered in chemicals. They were always spraying me. I was getting fumes everywhere. And these things were so volatile, they would easily permeate into the house. And and but like I said, if they stopped spraying, it'd gone in minutes. And so that way you can't call anybody and tell them to come over. Hey, come over, I'm getting sprayed. And there'd be nothing to analyze. There'd be no samples to collect, nothing. And so that went on, and it just kept increasing. And when I would go out into the town, the chemicals would follow me. The roads would get sprayed in front of me. If I'd go into a store, a lot of times when I drove to the store, the chemicals would already be there. And but quite often, what would happen if I was with somebody else, I'd go to a store, and sometimes the other people could smell the chemicals, and sometimes they couldn't. It all depended. Usually, they could smell them if we were outside. So I'd go to a store, park in the parking lot, everything's fine, go into the store with somebody else, and then we'd both come out and we could smell the chemicals. Like the whole parking lot would be sprayed. And I'd say to them, "Do you smell those chemicals?" They go, "Yeah." And I said, "They weren't there before, were they?" And they go, "No, no." Yeah, okay. And that happened quite often. They always knew where I was going. Uh, I'd pull into like a, one time I was with my son and we pulled into a Taco Bell and we immediately smelled bleach. And he said it before I did. He said, "Oh, bleach." And it came, we were in the parking lot. It came right through into the car. And oh boy, that just kept going and going. And the chemicals would get stronger and stronger. Um, and then we moved to Wilmington, North Carolina. And somebody wanted me, a family member wanted me to drive up to New York. So I got in my car and I drove up to New York, and I had bumper stickers on my car. At that time I had a website talking about the chemical spraying. And what I figured out that it was they were actually doing chemical dumping. Because like I said, I would find it in rivers and things like that. And I think what they were doing is taking chemicals they didn't need, like waste chemicals, and mixing them with uh, with something volatile, another chemical that would make it super volatile. And so when they sprayed them in the air or dumped them in the water, they would just evaporate and disintegrate. And so that way they didn't need a burn facility to get rid of their chemicals. They just spray them in the air. And then I was thinking, well, maybe that's what chemtrails are. Maybe that's just high atmospheric chemical dumping. They're just loading up planes with chemicals they don't want,
Mm-hmm.
mixing them, making them super volatile, taking the planes up and just spraying them out and letting them disintegrate. That way they could do chemicals that are more dangerous. They could they could spray chemicals in higher concentrations. Like instead of, if they had chemicals that aren't so bad, they can do those on the ground, but the chemicals that are stronger, they could take them up into airplanes. But that, that's just a speculation. Um, so then, like I said, I went to New York, and on my way up, I went through Washington, D.C., and I had these bumper stickers on my car talking about my website. And and one of the bumper stickers said military chemical dumping, and I had my website address. And so when I came back home, I started getting microwaved. And so I didn't feel it at first, but I felt the floor vibrating beneath me. And I didn't know what was going on. But and it kept like that. And if I moved to a different room, the vibration would follow me. But I didn't feel anything. But then after a few days, I would feel the microwaves at night while I was sleeping. They would get stronger. And then after a few weeks, I would feel the microwaves all the time. So so what happened was, so now two people have sort of fingered me. I've been targeted twice. Something that isn't supposed to happen to anybody in America has now happened to me twice. First time was with, they targeted me with chemicals, and then somebody else said, a new person said, "Hey, we got to upgrade this guy to microwave." So it's twice. Something isn't supposed to happen to anybody. So so then and just like the chemicals, the microwaves would just keep getting stronger and stronger. And in the beginning, I could use like simple forms of protection, like those mylar metallic emergency blankets that you use when it's, you
When
put
it's
them in your
cold.
pocket, and then if you get cold, you
Yeah.
can wrap them around yourself. Those
Yep.
kind of helped. But then after a while, I had to use like foil, solid foil, aluminum foil. And then even later, I had to use steel. I bought lead aprons, and those helped. And a lot of times, I'd lay down a lead apron and go, "Oh, that's great. Yeah, I can just use that." And then a week later, it would just go right through the lead apron. They just keep cranking up the microwaves, and it's like, and I didn't know how they were getting so close to me. I mean, these microwaves are coming out of the walls and the ceilings, and and I noticed that neighbors were getting recruited. Like I'd get this thumping, like uh, like the people above me would stomp right over my head, and it would follow me, and it would just be me that would get stomped on. And then there was a guy to the side of us that got recruited, and it sounded like he was hitting the wall with a battering ram. And I don't know what kind of attacks these were, but if I put up foil, if the guy was above me, the recruited person, I'd put up foil on the ceiling, and then the pounding would be outside the foil. They'd go around it. And likewise, that guy was on the side of me. I'd put up foil on the wall, and he would go to the side of the foil. He would go where the foil isn't to do the pounding. So I didn't know what they were doing, but they were doing something. And yeah, they could always tell where I was in the apartment. But yeah, it always, even when they were just spraying chemicals, it always seemed like, they were just out of reach, like they were close by, but I couldn't see them. And um, I thought maybe they were using like really super duper surveillance techniques to seem invisible, like they could get close to me, but I could never see them because, maybe they had satellites that could look right into your house, or, right through the roof. And maybe they could tell if anybody was looking out their window, so that they could, at night they could move around unseen. But it seemed like they had some sort of trickery they were using to not be seen. But I didn't know what it was. I thought it was some super type of surveillance. But then at night, it seemed like they would move in closer when they were spraying me, and and the chemicals would get really, really strong. And I even went out one time. One time I waited for them. I got in bed and I waited for them to spray me at night. And they did. It got really strong. And I ran out to the backyard and I could see, well, I could sense where the chemical spray was. There was like this wedge-shaped pattern on the grass. And I could walk across the lawn and I could tell where the chemicals were. They would just rise up, and I could smell them. And I could tell that they were right at the property line. They were spraying me right at the property line, but nobody saw them. I mean, no neighbors ever saw anybody. I never saw anybody. So then I started thinking that they had some sort of nighttime invisibility where maybe, if it's dark enough and they're far away enough, then you can't see them. It's not perfect, but at night, if you're far enough away, you just won't see them. That's what I was figuring. Um, but I realized I was wrong. Um, so what happened? So let's go back to when when they started microwaving me. Um, like I said, the microwaves, they'd follow me all throughout the apartment. Then we moved to an apartment when I was in Wilmington. And and it seemed like any apartment I was in, they recruited people. It never failed. I would move almost every year, and they were always able to recruit somebody. So yeah, the microwaves, they would just get stronger and stronger. And then I went to this one apartment, and the apartment below me, I didn't realize it at the time when I rented it, but the unit below me was empty. And so I moved into this apartment, and then 2 months later, somebody moved into the apartment below me. And that's when things got really crazy. They were just young people and they never went anywhere. They smoked marijuana all day long, never left the apartment. Sometimes people would bring them food. I hardly ever saw them leave. All they did was smoke marijuana all day long. They're supposed to be students, but I didn't see anybody ever going to school. So it was really strange situation. And that's when it seemed like they were using invisible people on me. I was starting to get chemicals in my food, and I don't know, nobody was coming in. I would barricade the door, and I would even bring food home from the store, put it in the fridge, and then like an hour later go to drink it or eat it, whatever, and I could taste chemicals. And so they were doing it practically right in front of me. And so this happened quite a bit. And so I don't know how they were getting into the apartment. I mean, I checked for trap doors. It was crazy. And then I even took a big stick because I figured, okay, there's invisible people in here. I know it, but why can't I touch them? So I took a big stick and I was running around the apartment, just poking in all the corners of the ceiling and whatnot. And I couldn't touch anything. So I said, this is crazy. And I have invisible people that I can't even touch. And I never heard of that. I never even heard a theory about that. They always tell you, oh, invisibility, it's they bend light to go around an object, and that's how they make it invisible. But that's not what was happening here. And so it just got crazier. Um, I started getting chemical attacks again too. I would like a lot of times when I got a chemical attack, I'd put a blanket over my head, and I had an air cleaner with me, an air filter, and I'd run that thing. But then they started pumping chemicals under the blanket, and there's nobody there. And then another time, they started spraying chemicals into the room that bothered my eyes. It would sting my eyes. And so then I started wearing goggles, And then they started pumping the chemicals inside the goggles. And so it would make it worse. I was better off with the goggles off because the chemicals would just build up inside the goggles. And, I would never feel like chemicals being sprayed into the goggles. They would just appear and they would just gradually build up over a few seconds. So it was very, very, very strange. Um, so years, maybe 2 years went by, and I was Googling like government invisibility, CIA invisibility, and I couldn't come up with anything. Uh, and I had no idea what they were doing. But I knew they had invisibility, and I knew I couldn't touch them. And I figured, well, if I can't touch them, then the walls can't touch them, and that's how they come through the walls. They can just enter. They can just go wherever. And so, like I said, yeah, I was just Googling invisibility and not coming up with anything. And then I tweeted to Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I did this stupid little tweet. I didn't even think he'd read it. I said, how does the government invisibility work? I know it's not light based. And he didn't tweet back, but I think he read it because I went to my website and somebody read it, and I got a lot of traffic on my website. Um, so he never tweeted back, but maybe about 6 weeks later, I got this video that popped up in my YouTube queue, and it talked about the fourth dimension. It said fourth dimension invisibility. I go, oh, what's that? Let's look. And so I watched the video, and it explained that if there were a fourth dimension, a higher dimension, a person could hide in that dimension and they would seem invisible to people in the 3D world. And they would have access to you, but you wouldn't have access to them. And they'd have access to your insides. They could maybe pull your heart right out of your chest without cutting you open and do things like that. And so I said, well, I guess there is a theory, but I never heard of it before. Why am I just hearing about it now? This is really strange. It's almost like they're keeping it from us. They don't want to talk about it. Because I did, a few years before that, I saw a documentary on invisibility. And I think the whole purpose of the documentary was just propaganda to show you how crude our attempts are at invisibility. And they don't want they want you to not worry that that they don't want you to worry that the government has any type of invisibility. So they never talked about interdimensional invisibility. They wanted to make it look like, oh, we're trying to make invisibility, but it's so crude. We just can't do it. There's just no way. So don't worry. So, just a second. Okay. So let's see. Yeah, and so basically, uh, this fourth dimension, we're all used to 3 dimensions, the 3D world. And, in the 3D world, we have length, width, and height. And so this fourth dimension, it would have to be a new direction that we can't penetrate, we can't move in. But I guess they found some way to move in this fourth direction. And once you can move in that fourth direction, that gives you 4 directions of movement. And once you do that, then you enter 4D space. And um, so that's how they're doing the invisibility. That's the only theory that I've ever heard of. And I mean, it answers, it checks all it checks all the check marks or the check blocks off. It fits like a glove. So I said, well, this must be what they're doing. But they won't. seems like science won't really talk about a fourth dimension, or if they do talk about higher dimensions, they always say, "Oh, well, it's these dimensions are tiny and you can't enter them." Don't worry, they're not. You can't enter them. That's why you can't go into the fourth dimension. If there was a fourth dimension, you could go into it. Well, why can't you go into it? Well, it must be really tiny. But I don't think that's it at all. I mean, if they seem to have found a way to get into that fourth dimension, and then I was wondering, I don't know, maybe a year or so later, I was wondering, well, why is there this fourth dimension? Why is there an area that I can't get into? Why does the universe have a restricted area? And then I thought, oh well, everything has a restricted area. If you look at any object around you, like a clock, it has a restricted area. It has an inside area where the workings are, where the gears and all that sort of stuff is. So if you want to use the clock, everything you need is on the outside. You can read the time, you can set the time, you can change the batteries if you have to. Um, everything to interact with that clock, everything you need is accessible on the outside. So you're not really supposed to go in its interior because you could damage the clock. So, and everything's like that. Car is like that. A car has an engine. The engine's tucked away. It's away from the operating environment. Your refrigerator, all the compressor, and all the things that make the refrigerator produce, to produce cold air. It's tucked away on the inside, and even after that, they shove the whole thing up against a wall. They don't want you going in there. It's designed to keep you out. And so everything is like that. And so, well, isn't that weird that nobody talks about that? You know, the nobody says, "Hey, everything has an interior where the working components are." Maybe the universe is like that too. And then I was thinking, well, what would be the inner working of the universe? And I say, oh, it's got to be the fabric of space. It's what creates gravity. They're always talking about the fabric of space, how it seems to be this real thing that can be distorted. And if you take a planet, a heavy object like a planet, it automatically distorts the fabric of space around it. But I mean, where is that fabric of space? We can't see it, we can't touch it. Nobody explains where it is, but it must be in this restricted area, which is the fourth dimension. And maybe I guess they found out some hack, some way to hack the universe to enter that fourth dimension and create invisible agents. And this is just something that nobody wants to talk about. And then I was thinking, oh well, I've also heard that to do interstellar travel, you have to go faster than the speed of light. And it seems like the only way to do that would be to distort the fabric of space, to manipulate it, and to use that to propel your vehicle. And I was thinking, oh well, yeah, well that makes perfect sense because if you enter the fourth dimension, if you go into 4D space and access the fabric of space to go faster than light, well, you don't have to worry about space debris because there isn't going to be any, right? You're not going to collide into any space debris, which could destroy your craft. So that solves that problem too. So, and these are things that scientists won't talk about, but they will talk about weirder things. I've heard them talk about things like, oh, we could be living in the Matrix. We could be living in a simulated reality run by artificial intelligence, and they'll explore that possibility, and but they won't explore the possibility of entering a higher dimension to travel to other planets. But that's how the spaceships in Star Wars work. And Star Wars is like the most popular science fiction movie of all time. And And when they go into hyperspace, that's what they're doing. They're entering a higher dimension to go faster than light. But they still won't talk about it. But they'll talk and also talk about the multiverse. They'll talk about, infinite number of universes where there could be other copies of you, except, you're more successful, you're a movie star in that other universe, things like that. And so they're willing to talk about all these crazy things, but they stay away from that fourth dimension. They just won't go near it. And it just seems pretty odd. It seems like it just seems like a conspiracy on their part not to talk about it. And I guess, I guess a lot of it is, it would change, it'd be too big a change on society. I mean, if society knew that they were invisible agents that could just fly right into your house and do whatever, read your mind, go through all your stuff, um, things would change. I mean, the government wouldn't, they would lose some of the control they have over you, and it would alter the way people lived. Um, I'm not really sure what they would do, but people like to think that they have some sort of privacy and that they're free. And if the government comes after them, it'll be obvious. They'll be able to see it, be able to prevent it, be able to sue somebody, stuff like that. But yeah, I don't think people are ready for invisible agents just to fly right into their house and start microwaving them or putting chemicals in their food, reading their mind. And that's another thing they can do. They can read minds. That's the first thing I figured out. Uh, that's going back to the time when they were just spraying me with chemicals. I was in my bedroom trying to sleep, and I just laid down to go to bed, and my mind was wandering, and I was thinking about sex, and I noticed when I thought about sex, the chemicals would stop, and it's like they were paying attention to my what I was thinking about, and then and I noticed that right away. I go, oh, and so then I switched my thinking back to something else, and the chemicals started back up again. And I did that. I repeated that like 6 times, and the same thing happened every time. And so then that's when I realized they were reading minds, and they can do it easily. It's no trouble at all. It's I think they're just, and when I thought about it, I go, well, yeah, that's probably the easiest thing they can do because everybody's brain emits brain waves, and so all they have to do is pick up the brain waves and just, I don't know, somehow feed them back into somebody else's brain, somebody that's going to monitor you. And I think that's what they were doing because it's instantaneous. And so they know everything before you're going to do it. And they also know, I think one of the main things they would use it for is to make sure I'm being tortured at the right level. If they use a microwave on me, and I found some way to minimize it, they'll know right away, and then they'll switch it. They'll switch to a different attack. And there have been times when I try to ignore the attacks. Think, they'll give me a really bad attack, and it's like I don't like this one, and I'll just try to ignore it, and then maybe they'll think it doesn't bother me, and they'll switch to something else, and that never works. It never works. They always know if it's bothering me or not. Um, so yeah, mind reading. That's one of the easiest things they can do. But yeah, the invisibility. I've never seen it glitch. It's perfect. Never seen. They're right next to me. They're on me. I've never seen like somebody pop in, pop out. It's really bizarre. It's infallible. They just never make a mistake, and it must be cheap. I mean, if they're using it on me, it can't be that hard to do. And it makes you wonder, well, who else are they using it on? Um, So yeah, it's pretty crazy stuff.
You're not the first person that I've talked to about stuff like this, to be honest. So
Oh, really?
it's one of the first people I talked to. So I think this was like episode 7. And a lot of people, if they go back and listen to it, they're going to write it off because the guy admits that all of this started for him when he was on methamphetamine. But he believed that he was being like targeted and harassed by these invisible agents. He said they sprayed stuff on him. They were doing all sorts of stuff. He could like he could somewhat see them, but he couldn't see them. Like you could see like a reflection like through a bottle. Like you couldn't see it with your naked eye, but like you could see it like if you looked at this your black part of your phone, like you don't have it on, but it's black, you might be able to see a glimpse of something moving on that. So
Yeah, it's weird.
What I've come to think about when you've mentioned this different dimension, and I wasn't really involved with the dimensions or portals or anything like that back a couple of years ago when I started the show. But the one thing that seems to be a trend here lately that I've been noticing is the term interdimensional. And I'd interviewed someone last year. It was Mike Rickseger. He wrote a book called Time, the Fourth Dimension. But there's been other dimensions scientifically theorized. I can't really say they exist, but the calculations and mathematics prove that there are probably different dimensions. So who's to say that these things, whatever they actually are from a different dimension? You're saying they're agents, but you've never actually seen them.
I've never seen them, but I have heard people up in the attic. Like I was on this I was in this third story apartment building, and at least 3 times I've heard people in the attic, and they were people, and they weren't walking. If you had somebody in the attic and they're walking on the joist, you'd hear the creaking, but they weren't walking on the joist. Somehow they were moving around without walking. Maybe they were doing some kind of levitation. I don't know. But one time somebody dropped something. They dropped something kind of heavy. It sounded like it weighed about a pound, and they dropped it from maybe, they're 3 feet, and it made this big thud right above my head. And then after that, I heard somebody talking up there. And I couldn't make out what they were saying because it was all muffled, but it was definitely a human voice. And that made me think, if he's talking, well, there could be somebody else up there if he's talking, or he could be talking into a microphone. I don't know. But he was talking. And he said something and lasted maybe 10 seconds, and then it was gone. And then another time in the same apartment, I heard somebody twisting a screw into the wood, and I could hear it. Like, it was no doubt about it. Somebody was twisting a screw into the wood, and I could even point to it. It was above the kitchen sink. And then I heard them like drop the screwdriver, and then I heard them like shifting on the beams and fumbling for the screwdriver. And then I guess they got the screwdriver, and then I would hear the twisting again. And that was like right over my head. I could point to it. So somehow, and the apartment I'm in now, so somehow, like I said, they're popping in and they're popping out. And the apartment I'm in now, I'm on the second floor, and there's an apartment above me. And about a year ago, or less than a year ago, well, about a year ago, the people above me, they were recruited. They moved out. And for a long time, over 6 months, the apartment was vacant. And I could hear people up there moving around. I never heard footsteps, but if I went into a room, I'd hear somebody set down equipment right above me. And then one time I got up out of bed, and as soon as I got up, I could hear somebody in the apartment above me. It's like they were sitting on the floor, and I can hear them getting up, I can hear them sliding their legs around them to stand up. And and then and then later I was in the living room, and it sounded like there were two people wrestling right above my head. And I said, well, maybe, sometimes when maintenance comes in, I can hear them moving around. So maybe maintenance is up there. So I went to the window. I walked to the window, which overlooks the parking lot, and I looked for their maintenance cart. They drive these little golf cart thingies. And I didn't see that, but instead, I saw one of the ladies from the office. She had driven her car into the parking lot and parked it, and she was walking toward the building. And it turns out somebody's water heater had busted, and she was coming over to look at it. And that was on the first floor. But that's what all that movement was in response to. They saw her coming, and they didn't know what she was doing here. And they thought maybe she was going to go into the apartment. So they had to, I don't know, scramble and get their equipment, pick up their equipment and get out of there. And I think they're just popping in and popping out, 4D popping in, 4D popping out. And I think it was after that. I'm not sure, but now we have this van parked out in the parking lot, and it doesn't move. It's a van with a high top. It's got these louvered blinds all over the windows. All the windows are covered, and you can't even look in the front windshield because there's a huge blind that goes across, behind the seats. And then just recently they tinted the windows. So now there's two layers of covering. There's tinted windows and the louvered blinds. And I think they're using it as storage for when they need to, if they need to pop in and pop out in case somebody comes over. And the van never moves. So I think sometimes I think about that. Is it some sort of interdimensional being that just lives in the fourth dimension? But I don't think there really is anything in the fourth dimension except the fabric of space. And there's nothing to eat. There's only what you take in there. And like I had this idea. Remember I told you that they were spraying chemicals inside my goggles to bother my eyes. Well, anytime they did that, I never, and they would spray me with other things too sometimes, but I never felt the pressure of a spray. The chemicals just gradually materialized. So I was thinking, well, maybe they spray them in the fourth dimension, and the chemicals are just ejected out into the 3D world. There's it's like when you hold a beach ball under the water and then you let go, it pops to the surface. So maybe that's what they're doing. Anything they release inside this 4D world, it can't stay there. It pops up. There's pressure, some kind of pressure in there, and it pops up into the 3D world. And I think, well, and I was thinking, well, that's probably what the fabric of space is. It's like an ocean, and the deeper you go, the more pressure you encounter. And so heavier planets will extend deeper because they're heavier. It's just like an ocean. The bigger the boat, the deeper it's going to sink before it gets buoyed up. Boy, there's so much to think about. There's so much to talk about. So much has happened. This has been going on for so many years.
I was going to ask, I didn't want to interrupt, but I know one of the biggest things when I have episodes like this, I get asked why I don't ask this question a lot because I don't try and, if you're familiar with my show, I don't try and prove or disprove anything that someone's trying to say. That's not what I'm about. But the number one thing that will be asked to me is, why you? Like that's always
right.
Like of all the people
Right.
in the world, why are they doing this to you?
Right. Yeah, I've thought about it. And the only thing I can figure is, well, first off, when I complained about the chemical dumping and I got the EPA inspection going, they had to pause their dumping for a few days. So I think I just annoyed somebody. And, these are powerful people and they don't like it when little people get in their way. And I think that's part of it. They want to show me who's boss. But then another part is, and this might be a bigger part, where is that they've had these programs for a long time that go after people. And, they started them for one reason or another. Uh, probably way, way back since the beginning of government. I'm sure they've had programs that just go after people, like people they don't like. And these programs they're kind of like their own living, breathing organism. I mean, they want to thrive and they want to grow. A lot of government programs are like that. They want to get bigger. And I think they do things just to do things, just to, whoever's running that program, to him, that's his world. That's his empire. And he wants it to do well and he wants it to grow and stay strong. And so they need people to go after. They need people to go after to keep the program from atrophying. And they also need more people to go after so that the program can grow. And that's what government programs want to do. They want to get bigger. And it's just like all these senseless wars that we fight, like in the Middle East. Like, why are we even there? We were in Afghanistan for 20 years for no reason, and nothing came of it. But it's not the winning of the war. It's the fighting of the war. It's the process. It's 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 the um it's the running of it. It's the management of it. These are jobs. These are jobs, and these are people who want promotions and they want raises, and it just runs itself. I mean, that's the problem with government. Once something gets started, it just keeps going, and it's very hard to end it. And usually, they just want to get bigger. I mean, I think I think every government program is like that. They just keep getting bigger and bigger and out of control. And so it's not me that's important. It's not the target that's important. It's the program that's important. It's the program that they need to keep going. And and I think the only reason they ended the Afghanistan war after 20 years, because people are like, hey, it's been 20 years. Come on. What's going on here? They almost had no choice. Plus they had the Ukraine war they wanted to get going, so maybe that's why. But yeah, it's just government bureaucracy, basically. Um, that and like I said, they just don't like it when little pipsqueaks get in their way, like me. So
Yeah,
I think
for me,
that's it. It's
for me,
mhm,
and it's, uh, I don't experience this type of stuff, so I can't relate to it. But like, it's hard to wrap your mind around it because, like you said, for being a normal person or whatever, it just seems weird that they'd go through all this effort to do stuff
right.
like this.
But to them it is no effort. I mean, it's almost like it's like you go into McDonald's and asking the people in the kitchen, why do you work so hard? You know what I mean? It's like, well, I want to get paid. I want to make some money so I can take it home and buy some food. Um, it's 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 really, I know a lot of people think that. I used to think that too. It's like, why do they go to this kind of trouble? But it's government. It is no trouble. And for them, it's they don't see it as anything wrong that they're doing. I mean, I don't know.
I don't think
I
there
mean,
is
it seems to
a
be
when it comes to agencies and other things. I don't necessarily think they have a good or bad agenda. I think they have that agenda as self-preservation. So
right.
they're going to do what they're going to do, and if this is actually what's going on, then I don't think you're
Yeah.
you're just
Well,
you're just there. You're not necessarily.
yeah, you're just there. You're just a pawn. You're just meat to put into the meat grinder. What I see with when it comes to government is that they always make the wrong decision. Um, if there's a choice between right and wrong, they usually go with wrong because that brings them more money and more power. Usually that's what every decision's based on. Money, will this make me more money? Will this make me or us, the government, more powerful? And that's usually what runs the show. I wish it were the other way around. I wish they cared about the citizens, and I wish they did things that were right. Occasionally, I think they must do some things that are right. I mean, offhand, I can't think of anything, but they must do some. But I'm constantly seeing things that things they shouldn't be doing, and it's like, why didn't they do this? Instead, they did that, and that's wrong. But yeah, I think it's money and power. That's what controls what they do. It's hard for us to wrap our heads around it because they don't have to act responsibly. They get taxpayer money, they borrow money, they print money, they can do whatever they want. There's no rules. Whereas, when it comes to normal people, we have rules. We have to do certain things. We can't spend too much money. We gotta, be nice or we go to jail. With them, there's almost there's no oversight. There's nobody they have to answer to. Um, and I think a lot of it is money. They just have so much money that they're unstoppable. Rules and common decency just goes out the window. Uh, but let's see. Another thing they can do is this sounds really weird, but they've done this a few times where they can pump a gas directly into my windpipe, and I can hardly breathe. I can't breathe. But if I open my mouth, my mouth will be just billowing out gas like the tailpipe of a car. I can just stand there with my mouth open. You can't see it, of course. It's clear, but I got this gas just coming straight out of my mouth. And to breathe, I'll have to expel it very forcefully, and then to take short breaths in. And the first time they did that, they did it for about a minute and a half, and they've done it afterwards. They did it later too, but not as strongly. But that's something they can do. They have access to your insides, and they can put chemicals in my mouth yeah, they can put chemicals in my mouth, in my throat. My mouth is closed. They put chemicals in my eyes. My eyes are closed. And a few years ago, used to be when I got microwaved, they were shooting like microwave guns at me, things, actual rays. But now they still do that, but now their primary method of attack is nanobots. And these are, nano means small or microscopic. So these are microscopic things, and bots is short for robots. So these are like microscopic machines that they can program to do certain things. And you can't see them. They're too small to see, too small to feel. And so they have these nanobots that can emit their own microwaves. And so they started that. Maybe that was a few years ago. It's on my website. I have it kind of detailed when certain things happened. Um, but and the reason they do that is that you can't really, it's harder to shield against it. Before I was using shielding on my head. And like I said, I had the lead aprons, and now I wear a lead vest all the time. Uh, but so like if I've got a like metal covering my head, if they put nanobots on my scalp, then the radiation generated by the nanobots gets reflected. It'll go up, hit the metal, and then go get reflected back into my head. So it just makes it worse. So now that's their primary method of attack. And the things they like to use, they can use it on anything. And that's the thing. this sounds strange. When people think about other people being microwaved, people say they're being microwaved, and you just picture somebody with a tinfoil hat, and okay, you put a tinfoil hat on your head and you go about your day. But it's not like that. They can target individual body parts. Like I said, they can target my eyes. Uh, and it's like, how are you doing that? How do you just target one little thing? Um, but their favorite things to do are, number one is the brain, and number two, the genitals, and then three is the liver. And they started doing my brain. First, it was my joints. When I first started getting microwaved, I'd feel it in my joints, and I was popping tendons. If I did anything with my hands, like struggling with my hands, I'd pop tendons in my hands. I was injuring them, and my tendons were all withered. I had this like withered, they were all stringy. It was weird. But then they started doing my brain, and so I started having to cover that. But then when they started using nanobots, I had to use I had to start using like wet towels on my head. So that's what I would do. I would put wet towels on my head, cover it with a hat, and I'd put a headband on and put wet towels underneath the headband, and that worked for about a month, maybe 2 months. And then what happened was the water started making, the wet towels started giving power to the nanobots. The nanobots got power from the water. It's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And so it drove, I was in the car and I had these wet towels on my head, and I could tell the nanobots were like in the water and just getting stronger. And I just ripped it off my head, and I got relief after that. And then I said, well, what am I going to do? And that's what a lot of this is. It's like they come after you with different ways, and you got to figure out how to fight it. You got to figure out what kind of countermeasure can I use against this thing. And then once you figure it out, they change it up. So it's a constant battle. Like I said, you don't just put a tinfoil hat on your head, call it a day. It's a constant war. Um, so so I couldn't use the water. So I started using dry towels, and then I started using magnets. And I figured, and then the magnets, they would help disrupt the nanobots. And sometimes I'd go back to the wet towels. Like now I often use wet towels. But it depends. They could switch it up, and then I have to go back to dry. And another thing I started doing later on is the nanobots seem to penetrate my skin really good. So I had to start using plastic wrap. I started putting plastic wrap on my head, and anywhere they, like they use it on my genitals too, the nanobots, and on my liver. So I've got plastic wrap and towels. And, it takes forever for me to get prepared, for me to do things, especially going to bed. When you go to bed, that's when they really attack you. They really come all out. And a lot of times when I'm sleeping, I'll have 7 body parts getting attacked at the same time. Usually during the day, it's like 3, maybe 4, but at night it's like 7. So it can take me an hour to get ready for bed. And sometimes I have to use hot water bottles because they have microwaves that'll make you cold. And I don't know how they do that, because normally microwaves, they heat up the area. Some of them do. Some of the microwaves heat up, some like cut, some like they'll shrink blood vessels. They can do all kinds of things, but they do have a microwave that can kind of like freeze you, and they'll use that on my genitals a lot. So for that, I'll have to use hot water bottles. So they just got all kinds of things. And then sometimes I think to myself, boy, I wish there was like a microwave, like a government microwave expert, like a microwave attack expert that I could talk to or go to. And then I think, oh yeah, it's me. Because there's nobody else. Nobody else will touch this stuff. And it's kind of depressing. It's like, well, I got nobody to talk to. You're on your own, basically. you're on your own. No, there's nobody out there to help you. And so I'm grateful you'll let me be on your show, and because I reached out to a lot of podcasters, and they just don't want to have anything to do with it. It's just I don't know if they feel like they're going to lose listeners or they just think it's too crazy. But I mean, you'll talk these shows, they talk about alien abductions, Bigfoot, and bases on the moon. And so what's so strange about the government going after people? I mean, that seems more plausible to me. Uh, so this seems to be the one conspiracy theory that nobody wants to talk about it. But why is that? Doesn't that seem strange? I mean, what's implanted in all our brains to make us think that this is automatically crazy talk? Because I used to think that way too. I used to think, oh no, that's government doesn't do that. Russia might do that, but our government doesn't do that. Um, but I think all governments are governments. They're all the same. They're all inherently evil. That's just the way they are. There's nothing you can do about it. I mean,
Power
the best
corrupts.
thing is, yeah, they're all corrupt, and the best thing you can do is just keep the government as small as possible. And that just, that's the problem with the United States, I think, is they just have too much money, and there's just, any whim they have, they can fulfill it. Just because there's just so much money there.
I think when it comes to other shows and how they decide how they, this is just my opinion, it doesn't mean anything, but there's certain themes that they, like, I know on my shows that talk more about cryptids or something, like they do more numbers, more downloads. Like those are the things that more people want to listen to. So then you have, my show has tinfoil in the name. So I'm broad to all sorts of things
Yeah.
because I'm more accepting. I'm not going to tell someone, no, I'm not going to listen to your story or your interview. And I've explained this before. I don't necessarily prove or disprove anything. Like, I'm rooted in skepticism to keep grounded. Like, when you talk about some outlandish things, I'm like, well, always, that's just my mechanism of trying to figure out possible other scenarios, just because I feel like if you start to go down so many rabbit holes, I've seen this with other people, like they never return. Like, take, for instance, the events that just happened with the weather in the last couple of months, like with the hurricanes. I've seen so much misinformation being spread, and I'm not saying that the government doesn't control the weather and doesn't have the ability to do that type of stuff. But I also seen some outlandish things that were being thrown out there that I knew were 100% fake because they claimed there's never been a storm ever in the Gulf of Mexico before. I was like, I'm pretty sure Hurricane Katrina went through there. I'm pretty sure there's been other hurricanes that have went through the Gulf of Mexico. So I try not to go the misinformation route. I know a lot of other conspiracy podcasts lately have went off the rails when it comes to stuff like that. For me, I try and keep things just straightforward. I'm here to let people come on here and talk, and that's it. Like, I'm not out here trying to change the world, I guess. I'm just giving people an opportunity to talk about things that they can't talk about with anyone else, because for the whole reason of the name of Tinfoil Tales is, if you talk about stuff like this, most likely people are going to say you're insane. But
Right.
that doesn't mean it's not real. So
Hmm.
that's
Yeah.
why
Well.
I do what I do, because I feel like everyone should have an opportunity to talk about stuff.
Mhm. Right. Well, nobody knows everything,
Right.
and the only way you can find things out is by keeping an open mind and listening.
That
But
is,
there does seem to be something about this topic that people just want to rule out immediately. And I'll go on the internet and I'll do, I'll post here and there, and one thing I've found is, like, a lot of the UFO people, they don't want to believe that we already have the technology. I think we do. I think it's interdimensional technology, and I think we've got it. I don't know where we got it. I don't know if we got it from aliens or if we developed it ourselves with, trillions of dollars in research. I don't know. It's possible. I mean, I don't underestimate the human race. I think we're very smart. A lot of people think that aliens are. I saw an article. I didn't read it, but I saw the headline. It said aliens from outer space are 200,000 years ahead of us in technology. It's like 200,000 years. That's an awful long time. I mean, a lot can happen in 200,000 years. How does he know that? But I think there's a lot of propaganda. I think they want you to think that. I think they want you to think that we're nowhere near having that kind of technology. Because, like I said, are you free if the government can invisibly fly into your home and start reading your mind, going through all your stuff? Nobody wants to live in that world. And are you going to be able to control people once they know that? So I think that what was I talking about?
Hmm.
I'm really having a hard time. My neck is hurts. They constantly come after me. They're constantly zapping my head, and it just scrambles my brain. It's hard for
We're
me to hold it
talking
together.
about the. You've got me sidetracked now, so I'm thinking about that. You
Oh,
were
oh, something about
how the world wouldn't be
yeah,
able to
okay, about
handle.
aliens. They want it,
Yeah,
yeah, okay. Like yeah, I believe that we've got the technology. I think well, I've witnessed it. I've witnessed it. And I think the traveling to other stars, I think that is interdimensional. And I think we have that technology. Whether or not we can travel to the stars, whether or not we have the craft, I don't know. But we know the basics of that technology. And I would assume that we have all of it. Um, and I was thinking the other day that Brandon, say a UFO landed in your backyard and they invited you to come on board. And you got on and they said, "Do you want to go see your planet?" And you'd say, "Yes, of course, take me there." And so they fly away, take you to their planet, and you're expecting all this wonderful things and technology. And you get off, it could be just like here, right? You could get off and they're driving the same type of cars. They're using the same basic computers similar to ours. They're watching Netflix. I mean, who knows? But they could have the same level of technology that we have. And then you would say to them, "Well, where's all the advancements?" And they'd say, "Oh, no, we don't give those to the people. We keep those for the government. We can't hand those to the people. We can't let the people have that stuff. It's too powerful. We have to, we have to use those as weapons. Um, even free energy. We can't let the people have free energy. We have to, they have to maintain a class system. They have to have rich, middle class, the poor, and you have to work to attain certain things to get the luxuries. They can't just let you have all this stuff. I don't think they'd ever let us have any kind of utopia. I don't even know if it's possible, even if you had all that technology. And so, I mean, I think that's where we are right now. Our government has all this stuff that we think the aliens have. We have the same stuff, and I don't know if it's helping us out. Maybe it is. Maybe after a while they leak certain things to us, certain advancements. Maybe they give it to certain corporations to develop little by little. They trickle it out. Maybe I don't know, but that seems when I tell people online that we've got the same technology, some of them get upset because they want to believe that fantasy that the aliens are going to come and they're going to give us this technology and it's going to turn the world into a utopia. And so they get kind of angry when I tell them, well, we've already got it and you're not getting it. So so yeah, I think it gives people hope. The idea that there are aliens out there that are more advanced. I think it gives them hope. And when I say the things that I say, it kind of crushes their hope, and they don't like that. So I'm up against that as well. And so, and it makes you wonder, where do people get these ideas? Is this some sort of, propaganda or brainwashing? Are they, you know, are they coming up with things that make us think this, that implants it in our head and we can't shake it?
I have
But
no idea where the whole notions come from. I have no idea what the
yeah,
agenda is, and
it's right.
I
We
don't
get
even
these
think they have an
beliefs and they're,
agenda.
yeah, well, we get these beliefs in our head and they're just rock solid. And it's like, we have no reason to believe that. I mean, why do you believe that? I mean, who has told you that? And are the people that tell you that, how do they know? I mean, like the guy that says aliens are 200,000 years ahead of us. Like, like, where does that come from? How can you
But
even make a statement like that?
it's just
But
guesswork.
people, yeah, but a lot of people believe it. They say, oh yeah, even Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan, I think I've heard him say that we have the technology, but then he'll turn around and say that when we compare ourselves to aliens, we're like ants. So which is it?
I've heard
Yeah,
someone
it's
say they're
just
about 50 years more advanced than we are.
50 years,
Yeah.
possibly 50,
That,
50.
yep. That is what I've been
Oh, maybe.
told, that they're
Yeah,
not as
maybe.
far as advanced as we think
No,
they are.
I don't think they are either. I mean, they look different. They look they've got big heads, they look strange. I mean, it could be that, like I said, if you go to their world, that might not even be what their people look like. They might look like something else. These could be just genetically engineered beings that maybe they're able to withstand diseases better, and they can live on our, move around on our planet without getting sick and dying. So,
If if you
there's just
look
a
at
lot we don't know.
humans and you look at what we think are ETs, in my opinion, what do we do when we're investigating new stuff like new animals or whatever? We go out to these areas, we do research on them. We maybe collect one, we tag it, we release it. Is that what they're doing with abductions? Well, we also don't always send out people. We usually send out drones. So maybe these things are their biological drones that they go out there and do all their research for them, because the actual species that are in control of them are, like you said, they don't look anything like that. These are just manufactured. Like we make machines. Maybe these things are biological machines that go out there and do their own research for them.
Yeah, maybe makes sense. I
We
mean,
do.
that's the thing. We just don't know.
No.
You know, we assume so much without really even knowing.
We have been going on
And
for
then we have
almost
all
an
these.
hour and a half, and I have some work stuff I've got to do in the morning, so I'm going to try and wrap this one up. But before we do, is there anything else you would like to discuss before we take off?
My website.
Okay.
I have a website that really goes into a lot more detail, and it's structured very, very well, so it makes it easier to understand. And it's not a lot of reading; it's easy to get through. It's chemspray.weebly.com. So it's ChemSpray.weebly.com.
You sent me
And
the
it
link to
goes
that, and
into.
I read through it, and I'll make sure to include that link in the show notes for anyone listening.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
And
not a
thanks for having
problem.
me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's not a problem. I've enjoyed talking to you. I don't want to cut it short or anything for anyone listening, but like my kid woke me up at about 2:30 in the morning, and I've got
Oh,
work in
well,
the, so
like I
I've
said,
got work in the morning too.
I
So it's like
I can only talk so long because they come after me, and
mhm.
I feel like I've got an egg beater scrambling my brains right now. I'm struggling to hold it together.
No,
But
that is
yeah, I
perfectly
appreciate you
fine.
letting me talk.
No,
And
not a problem.
it's a good show. I'll keep listening.
I appreciate that. Ken, you have a good night now.
You too. Take
Thank you.
care.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
And that's the show, everyone. I really hope you guys enjoyed the conversations. If you would like to be a guest on Tinfoil Tales, remember to send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com or go to the contact section of tinfoiltales.com. Just get your message to me. We'll get something scheduled for a future episode. And just remember, the truth lies in the stories we share, the connections we make. Stay curious, stay open-minded. Thank you all for joining us on this journey. And until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep exploring the unknown. Good night, everyone.
Tinfoil Tales in my headphones. Yeah, it's time to rock. Got a story about a cryptid creature. Let's take a walk. Bigfoot, dogman, they're out there in the dark. But the truth is out there like an alien spark. UFO sightings got the whole world shook. Conspiracies unfold like a story in a book. Media control, trying to keep us blind. But I won't be fooled, gonna use my own mind. In history, they don't want us to know the secrets they hide, the truth they won't show. Dominate our society, they keep us in chains. But I'm standing tall, it's time to break the reins. Control, trying to keep us blind. But I won't be fooled, gonna use my own mind. In history, they don't want us to know